Great. Well, everyone, first of all, thank you for taking the time to really be on this intimate Q&A today. Just as an intro, my name is Jorge Soto. I'm doing a variety of things nowadays, but I'm absolutely obsessed with B2B sales and technology and really the convergence between those worlds. I think the coolest thing that I've done in the short term is I was part of this startup called MoPub, which was a mobile ad server that was purchased by Twitter in 2013, and I was like the first hire there. I did a lot of the early grunt work, was a jack of all trades, and spent about a year and a half at Twitter. Ended up leaving a couple months ago to focus on helping one of the companies I was advising for a long time called DashTab. And nowadays I travel, do workshops with Sales Hacker, and write a bunch of content and try to spread the good word of sales development, branding, startups, entrepreneurship, hustle, those sorts of things. I'm really excited today to introduce everyone to Sean Kester, who was previously the head of sales development at SalesLoft in New York. Oh, I'm sorry, in Atlanta. And really great guy. I know, Sean, you're running product right now, right?
That's right. Cool. I'll give you a little intro on myself. Can y'all hear me? Nobody can hear me.
Try again. We lost sound. There we go.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Cool. Sweet. So as George said, I started here at SalesLoft in the very beginning. We had 5 people. They hired me to build out the sales development program here. Did so, built a team, built them up to 15 people. And then earlier this year in January, we needed a product manager. Can y'all hear me?
Yeah, we're good.
Cool. And so, our tools serve sales development folk. We have a prospecting tool and an outreach tool. And when we hired a product manager, we really needed someone who understood that space. And just like George was saying about being passionate about startups and sales and B2B and all of that, my passion lies really in sales development. And what that really means is helping people grow their revenue through what you guys do day in, day out, and then empowering them through tools and technology and best practices. So I kind of live, eat, sleep, breathe, all of those things. And so part of personal brand is close to me because it really helped me jumpstart people actually believing anything I said to begin with, and then kind of creating a platform for yourself in order to kind of share best practices and tools and tricks of the trade and all of that, where people will listen to you rather than you just being a talking head. So that's all I've got to say about that. I'm excited to do this.
Absolutely. So I think that's a good segue into answering the question, why is your personal brand important? So why don't we pose that question? Maybe we can go around the room quickly. Maybe 2 people.
Can you repeat the question really quickly?
I'll start off with why I think personal brand is important. I think as a professional, it pretty much defines who you are. It's something that's going to carry with you from entry level all the way out to the end of your career. It's just one of those things that really defines who you are, really without you having to say anything. It speaks for itself.
I like that. So like in a perfect world, you never have to interview again, right?
Exactly. Like, look at me, this is my brand.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, absolutely. To add to that, especially if you look at the climate that exists today, that we operate within, right? So you have products that become commoditized very, very quickly because the internet has such a low barrier to entry. You and I, like JM and I, can start a company tomorrow that builds lists and prospects, right? And so, when assuming that you're operating within that climate, what is going to give you that edge when you're prospecting? What's going to give you that edge when you're on a call? You want to be the expert in the room or on the call. And for me, that's one of the most powerful things, aside of the things that you just mentioned. Being able to build that brand, being able to speak with authority and data that's backed, that based on what you've been able to understand about that particular market, is incredibly important. Sean, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, I think you touched on it a little bit. I think the most important piece is being an expert, right? And so, we're all in sales development. You guys are all sales development reps. I'm sure most of you are at the beginning of your careers. and you might feel after a month or two that you've done it all, you know it all, right? Well, the facts of the matter is you don't, and there's always way more to learn. But the quicker that you can kind of immerse yourself, realize that you don't know everything, identify the people who do know everything, figure out what the traits or threads that they all share, copy all those things, and then kind of build off from there is probably the fastest way to become an expert in any field, which is one of the major stepping stones into becoming someone who has a personal brand at all.
And so in terms of desired outcomes, because I'm all about what are the things that you can do after this conversation immediately? What are the things that you can implement? So my desired outcomes is that, all of us hope is I think I sound most of the time, but what I would encourage us to do here is let's just write down a couple, let's say 3-4 things that you guys can actually implement after this conversation. So whether it's what Sean's going to talk about right after, setting up your social media profiles, optimizing your social media profiles to reflect that brand that you're building, using Twitter, LinkedIn, personal blog, all these sorts of things we're going to talk about, or if it's going and speaking at events and things like that. You might be sitting there going, how am I going to speak at an event? Like maybe I just started my career. There's things that we'll talk about that can really help sort of guide you in that direction. So that's my desired outcome.
Cool. And then I think mine, he kind of did an overarching. Mine's going to be tactical. By the end of this call, I want you all to update your LinkedIn profiles. If you don't have a Twitter presence, you're going to have one. You should at least start one up. I need you to become a part and active of LinkedIn groups. And then the last thing that we talked about is becoming an expert, and we'll kind of dive into all of those things one by one.
Great. So Sean, why don't you kick it off and really kind of give us a deep dive around social media? Yeah.
So we'll start with the LinkedIn profile. It's probably the most basic of all of them. Who here doesn't have a LinkedIn profile? Right? It's basically your calling card. It's your online resume. It's the first thing a prospect's going to see after you've either viewed their LinkedIn profile, or you send them an email, or you follow with a phone call, and you do all these different touch points. They're going to look at your LinkedIn profile. Now, when you and I are going to prospect people, how are you doing it? Through LinkedIn? Yeah? Cool. And you're looking to see how many keywords they have on their profile. What's their title? What companies they've done before? What kind of experience do they have? What function do they exist in within the company, right? What are they responsible for? So you can better profile them and then reach out to them. And so you might find a guy on LinkedIn or a girl and you say, man, this is a perfect prospect. I'm going to call him up. And the guy next to him doesn't have his updated profile. To you, on paper, it doesn't look like a good prospect. Well, when these prospects look back at you, they're thinking the exact same thing. So the first thing we're talking about is your job descriptions. Now, if your job right now just says AdRoll on it and then has a couple of lines underneath, or just AdRoll and the company summary, it's terrible. You're doing it wrong. There's nothing that speaks to you about any of your experience whatsoever. I saw some of you guys smirk a little bit, so I assume that's exactly what your LinkedIn profile looks like. So the second thing, what you want to do is you summarize those things. And it's not just what your company does, it's what you do for your company. So a sales development rep might be like, I come in, I build books of business, right? I go and, my job's a professional appointment center. I come in every day, I make cold calls and emails, I tactfully go reach out to these prospects, I send them some funny things, I reach out to them based on their own personal profiles and what functions they have in the company, I profile them by X, Y, and Z, and I use these tactics to reach out to them and set up appointments. Now, there's a couple different ways you can go wrong in there. The first one is being that guy that you looked at his LinkedIn profile and it just has a list of things that goes 172% of quota, 113% of quota in March, 112% of quota in April, right? And just lists a bunch of things because that doesn't mean anything to anybody. And those people that look at your profile are going to say, man, this guy just put a bunch of stats down there just for the sake of doing it. So you want to be tactful in how you do it, but precise and to the point that shows that you're an expert in the space itself. Cool? And then, before that, you got to get a profile picture. It's got to look fresh. So you don't want to be just sitting there at the bar or your Facebook photo that you crop someone out of who's got an arm in there still, right? Like, go up to a wall if you have to, get someone to take a nice professional picture of you, put it up on LinkedIn. There's tons of conferences you can go to. They'll do it for you. But you don't have to go get a professional photo. Just make it like just normal, like semi-professional photo. Look personable. You don't want to stand there. I saw one guy the other day. His LinkedIn profile picture is like him wearing like camo with like an airsoft gun, and it was actually someone who bought from us, and we had to comment on it. But like the guy was like, "Yeah, I love dressing up in camo and shooting airsoft." Okay. But you know, you see that guy on paper, and you don't think he's that personable. You want to come up to him. So we've talked about picture. We talked about summary. Now there's this button that everyone has underneath their summary or underneath the company they work for, and you're able to put content there. Now at first you may not have your own content, which is fine. Share the relevant content you guys have on your blog. That content's meant to bring people inbound and convert into appointments and demos. Use it on your profile to do the exact same thing. They spend a lot of time on making this. Grab a couple snippets, just throw it in there, and as you grow and as you develop your own content, you can replace it, but you got to have something, because one, it just makes your profile look cool, and two, it gives them something to look into. Like, this guy took enough time to write about his company, write about his role, provide me with some content on what they do and why they do it. I'm on his page, I might click on it. And so it's really as simple as just copying and pasting the link. It grabs a photo already. It's really easy to do. So we talked about summary within the company. I want to take a step back, talk about summary of your personal summary. So some people can just say like, you know, I'm a San Francisco native and I'm a sales development rep. Like, that's not enough. It really doesn't get to know you. You can use humor. You can use professionalism. I mean, honestly, it's just about being real. You know, it may say something like, started my career at What Counts. I help customers smart personalized message to their subscribers, blah, 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 blah. I recently moved to SalesLoft, one of the fastest growing companies in this and this. As you can't tell, I'm reading off one of our reps, but you know, I help people schedule 2 to 3 times more appointments, blah, blah, blah. I use my own tool, like we drink our own Kool-Aid, and I love working here, something like that. It's like, you're a human. Like, this is your summary of you as a human. You're not limited to 140 characters like Twitter. You can, you know, explain yourself. And it's all about building yourself as someone who not only cares, but they can understand where you're coming from and why you do it. And so, you know, we've done summary. You've got your kind of work summary. You've got some content in there, and then we'll talk about, you know, joining groups. And so, first of all, does anyone have any questions there? I kind of ran through that pretty quickly. Y'all breaking up? Y'all hear me? Or no one asked a question? All right, cool. So who feels their profile is complete? Anyone? Semi? Who thinks they can do a better job? Sweet. Nice. Nice. All right, cool. So one of the things I would love for you guys to do, and I will forward everyone on this call an email that I sent out to our SDR team back in the day. It's got some you know, some raw wordage in there, but it's pretty funny, and it kind of takes you step by step through what you can do. And you know, my goal would be have you guys at least once a month or once a quarter go through, throw some new content on your profile, and just keep it fresh, because that's how you're representing yourself to the professional world. And when your job is setting up appointments, anything you can do to create an edge is worth doing, especially if it's easy as updating LinkedIn profile. Cool. Now, last thing on there is content and stuff, and George and I will talk to you later on about doing your own content. But there's a publish section, and you want to keep that as up to date as possible. The second I publish anything, I throw to my LinkedIn profile. Gives everyone in the world not only a notification within LinkedIn, but you can have it be there as kind of a running tab of when you've pushed stuff out and how you care about the community and what it's doing. And even if it's something like 5 cool things, like 5 steps to be a better SDR, or 10 things I learned in my first week, it doesn't matter. It's something that you've written in your voice to the world, and usually it's content specific on what you do. And I can't encourage you enough to do that stuff. Cool. So, George, do you have anything to add to LinkedIn profiles?
Yeah, I mean, I've spent a lot of time building out my LinkedIn profile. If you guys are most of you are in front of a browser, you can check it out. Just search me on the LinkedIn, and yeah, I think you basically covered most of what I would actually consider. And so, yeah, content is the key, and having that refreshed as much as possible.
Cool.
Sean, quick question. In regards to LinkedIn groups, what's sort of your feedback there? I know you guys spend a lot of time on that.
Yeah, so LinkedIn groups, I think, could honestly be, you know, a lot of people use it for a lot of different things. Used correctly, it's one of the most powerful social business tools on the web, period. I mean, we all use LinkedIn to put our profiles up there, but groups is really where it's at. And it's really how once you have a good profile and presence, how you're gonna make kind of a dent and a splash in whatever community you want to. So for us, our community is sales and sales development. So a group like the Sales Hacker group is my favorite group in LinkedIn to grab any information or put any information on there as far as building a brand. But first, before you start, spamming people with stuff, there's really a lot of steps you need to take in order to become a recognized, legitimate, respected member of any LinkedIn group. And I'm kind of going to run through those with you guys. So the first thing you want to do is, whenever you join a LinkedIn group, you want to listen and monitor to it. That means you want to go back, you want to see the kind of content that's put up there, you want to see the kind of voice that people are doing it. Are the people just selling stuff on there, or are people really trying to ask each other for advice? I personally like groups that build a community around a topic or a subject or an industry that you can really learn from. And let's face it, we're all learning every single day. So I never go on to any group thinking I'm an expert and then I'm going to give advice. It's always communal in that people are asking how you do one thing or how you do another, and people kind of give feedback on how they're doing it, because there's really not a lot of silver bullets in business, specifically in kind of the sales development space. So you want to listen, you want to monitor, you want to understand how are people talking, how are they communicating, so that you can kind of you can communicate the same way. It's just like when you get on a cold call, you're never going to go aggressive when some guy's kind of passive, and you're never going to go passive when some guy's aggressive. You want to meet their tone and meet their wording and kind of meet their cadence of talking. So you can do the same thing on the internet as well. The second thing you need to do is, once you start getting in there, you think about it, it's like a big party and everyone's kind of hanging out in there. What you don't want to do is be that drunk guy in the corner who's slamming shots. You want to treat it like a cocktail reception. So if you were to all go to a happy hour, you wouldn't be the guy who walks into the party, doesn't say hey to anyone, doesn't check the scene, and just starts going slamming shots at the bar, right? Now there may be a time where you walk into a party and that's what everyone's doing, and that's great. You have a lot of fun. But if you don't check the scene and understand what's going on, and you don't kind of mimic it, you stand out in the worst way possible. So you want to treat it like a cocktail reception, in that you're kind of mingling around, you're kind of touching on what people are touching on, but you're not kind of being overbearing. You're not being the guy who comments on every single post. You're not the one that has to always follow up with how his way is better, right? You're adding to this conversation. You may get a few laughs of it. You're making some networks. But when people see that you actually care and that you're putting in input, whether they believe it or not, you start to build that brand of a person who, I like to say, or use the word practitioner, right? Like, we're practitioners of sales development because it's what we do every day. We're not the people who are consultants or who have done it before that are telling everyone what the best practices are, because those were, and some of those are principles that we'll always live by. But I would rather ask you how you're doing and how you're hitting your quota than somebody who said, I can hit my quota 5 years ago, right? So the people, you have this leg up in that you're a practitioner, so use it to your advantage. You can say things like, in the past we have done this, and we're trying this new thing, and this is the results we're getting. That means 1,000 times more than anyone else who says, well, when I built a company 10 years ago, this is how we did it. And I swear to you, it works. So treat it like a cocktail reception. So then after you've done that, start a discussion. Start your own discussion. And there's some really good strategies around this. And and I'll tell you the way I used to do it, which is wrong, the way I do it now. So the wrong way to do it is to have a question that you want an answer to and say straight up, hey, if you could, what would you rather do, this or this, right? And you're just like, you want an answer to something that you're trying to figure out, and you make it very narrow. You ask the question specifically trying to get two answers, or kind of guiding people to that answer, because at the end of the day, no one's there to just answer your questions. You want to start a discussion. And I did that a few times, didn't get very much feedback on it, and then I thought to myself, what can I do to get people to ask a lot of things? The first thing you do is ask a question who's controversial, right? A question that people have very strong opinions on both sides, but the conversation can go very wide and get deep. And so one example of this is on that Sales Hacker LinkedIn group, I asked a question about inbound leads. Now, there's many types of ways that you can deal with inbound leads. Some of them you give just to your junior people. Some of them you give just to your senior people. Some of them you give everyone, a mix of both. And everyone stands very firmly on one of those grounds. And so you phrase the question like, hey, I've heard this a lot. Here are 3 things. What's best practice, and what are some success stories or failures, right? And I kid you not, there's like 40 responses on it, in record time because everyone's got an opinion on it, and all I have to do is mediate throughout the way, like, hey, great response, what about this? Or great response, what have you thought about that? And what I'm doing is all of a sudden I became somebody who, from a high level, wasn't aggressive, wasn't pushing my opinion, but facilitating a conversation where tons of people learn from it, and then it's your face that's posted on the top of every one of those replies. And so again, you're kind of building up a brand of being someone who's inquisitive but also knowledgeable and doesn't know how to push people around. I hope that makes sense. Another good question to have with people is around who sales development reports to. Now, you ask that question, and you're going to have 10 times more answers, and everyone's going to be really aggressive because you got your VP of sales and your CMO are arguing, who owns them. So it's fun to see those things, and you can do it industry specific. The next thing you want to do is once you've kind of contributed, you've started your own conversation, you want to start sharing other people's conversations and building them up, right? The number one way to get people to retweet you or republish your stuff or like your things is to like their things and tell them how great they are. No one likes hearing their name more than anyone else or something they've done. So those are the two things. I think it's, it's like the How to Win Friends and Influence Others, Dale Carnegie's book. He said the sweetest word to any human is his own name. So you start building up someone else's name, and they're going to build you up right back because it's reciprocal, right? You've got nothing behind it. You have no wrong intentions. So share and amplify it. So grab what they're putting. Hey, great post by Jorge Soto today. Tweet it out. Throw it up on LinkedIn, and all of a sudden he's looking back at you. And now George may be higher, like the hierarchy of the world and importance could be way, way, way above me. But the fact that I'm going out and made this one personal connection, where I may be very junior, automatically puts you up there where someone else is sharing yours, who may have way more influence than you, and then you're amplifying what you're doing as well as amplifying what they're doing. The next thing is make it routine. So do it weekly, monthly. There's a fine line with this. Don't do it every day, and don't tweet everything someone does, or else they'll get really annoyed with it. They're like, why is George liking every single thing? George has a habit sometimes really late at night to go binge like things on Twitter. And so he may wake up with 20 things in a row favorited from George. Now, if I didn't know George, I'd say, what the hell is George doing? But because I do, it's different. So you want to make sure you don't cross that line, but you also want to make sure that you don't do it so infrequently that no one knows who you are. And the last piece is drive your brand. If you like talking about lead generation and specifically how to get inbound content marketing to do it, talk about it. Keep talking about it. Don't stop talking about it. Post other people's stuff that talk about it. Like people's comments that talk about it. And become kind of the guy, like you're building a brand of a knowledge base. And we'll talk about becoming an expert, but you want to have a niche into one thing. You can't just say, oh, I like sales, right? It's like, is it inbound? Is it outbound? Do you like external sales, inside sales, right? There's many different ways you can go with it. And I can talk more and more about LinkedIn groups. I hope you guys have felt the stressed importance that I put on it, but it's really one of the fastest ways to take you from a dude behind a computer making cold calls all day to someone who's got a name with a face that people actually will listen to in the future.
Yeah, and being able to identify that face. I mean, your face becomes your brand, right? I mean, that's the most personal way to identify someone. I had a quick question. So, a lot of what we talked about, or Sean talked about, was around sales topics and these sort of things. JM and just say, the AdRoll folks, what would be, let's say, a LinkedIn group or a topic that you think that would be meaningful for you guys to be engaging in?
We're using a software called Outreach.io, so maybe just best practices with different outreach softwares, what's working effectively, and the successes with those.
Yeah, that might be a good one for sure. What about specifically to retargeting? And I don't know the answer to this question, so I'm just trying to stimulate some thought. Are there some groups that are talking about retargeting and best practices and account-based marketing and all the really cool stuff that you guys do really well? That for me, if there was a group, and I know there's probably some group out there about that, a marketers forum, online marketing, discussion group or whatnot, being able to go in there and just create a conversation around that topic is immensely powerful. Do you see that?
Yeah.
And having that and sharing and answering questions. it's insane how many leads I'm able to generate when I log into LinkedIn and I start engaging on the groups for my own, products that I've been pushing, over whatever time period. I mean, so I would encourage you to sit down, create a list of these online marketing groups, see if there are any retargeting groups that you can start to ask questions in or answer questions within. I know Kevin, who's another participant on this hangout. I know Data Nice does this so much. Jason Vargas might have told you that I think it's part of their actual process to go in and spend time on LinkedIn groups talking about, of course, sales-specific topics because they sell sales products, right? So that's really, really important. JM, really talk to Jay about that because they do that fantastic.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think one of the buzzwords these days is social selling, and I personally won't give you my opinions on what I think about it as an industry, but I think it falls under the major category of just selling, and that being in inside sales, we all get caught in this. I'm behind the computer, I'm on the phone, I'm on email, and you're trying to be personal, so you have to actually go beyond just phone and email. And you have to get on social, and you have to do those things, but you can't expect to get it all done in one way, and you can't be able to expect to get it all done the other way. You have to do it all in conjunction with each other, and that personal branding is just a piece of it.
Absolutely. So I want to go through some of your questions here because then we have about 30 minutes left, but I'm just going to run through a couple things. So the first thing that I'm going to run through is events and collaboration. Okay, so look at what we're doing right now. Like, I pinged Sean, I go, hey, we love this topic, we love sales development, I've been an SDR before, and why don't we collaborate and put on a small event here, right? And so this is a prime example of one of the collaborations that we've done, right, and that we continue to do. So that's the first thing. Is there something that you can do within the context of the brand that you're trying to build that will be helpful, right, with other folks? So one idea might be, and of course you got to talk to people within your organization. I'm not saying, hey, we should all start going rogue and doing a bunch of webinars and stuff on our own, but sit down with JM and say, hey, are there any things that we can do around putting a webinar or discussion together around best practices in around retargeting, right? And so I know this is a marketing function, but let me tell you something, that those two worlds are really converging, right? Like what we do as SDRs right now started off kind of walking this thin line between inside sales and marketing, where marketing was like, hold on, I'm sending out the emails and those sorts of things. But they didn't get that those were actually marketing emails. In any case, what I'm trying to actually just kind of paint a picture for you here is sit down and you have to focus on doing these sorts of things, not only for your personal brand and get content out there that's going to help you, but it's going to help you convert and book appointments. I promise you on this. Okay, so you might have to talk to your marketing organization. You might have to say, hey, JM, let's go over there and try to make a case for doing some of these things. And if you can roll up some of these initiatives under sales development, that becomes really important. And start to get other folks, even if it's like, there's got to be a complementary technology that AdRoll works with. So think of that. And so here's a good example, right? DashTab was one of the products that I represent, that I've helped mold and was an advisor and helped to this day. I've helped co-found that product. I'm going to ping Data Nice and say, hey, Data Nice, we're in the same category. Why don't we do a little discussion? And maybe it's a LinkedIn discussion group. Maybe it's a blog post on the personal blog or on my blog or the company blog, etc. So those are the collaborations that I'm talking about. And not only is it helping you build your personal brand, but it's great for generating inbound leads. It's a great link to have if you're pinging someone, you're cold calling them, sending them cold emails. You can send them that link and say, hey, by the way, here's a topic, something to consider, and it's you as the author. Do you see how powerful that is, as opposed to some third-party, person out there that's that wrote the content, and that's fine too. And here's the reality. The reality is you've got to create a voice, everyone. you have to have a voice, and you have to have that voice and opinion based on whatever topic you want to build your brand in. Now, look, you got to stand by that voice. I have a very particular voice. You know, I'm a hustler. You know, I'm a sales hustler. I'm an entrepreneur. That's what I do. I'm not a, you know, I've run teams and I've closed a million things, but I'm an entrepreneur. If you look at my resume, if I really gave you my real resume, I would be completely unemployable. You know, but that's the brand that I built, and I have the confidence that you can put me in any situation that sales or marketing or building something or going to market with something, and I'm going to do really well, right? That's the brand that I built. So if you look at my new website, it's sotoventures.com. I mean, I don't exactly know what I wrote, but I think that the tagline is a hustler's journey through sales, entrepreneurship, sales, startups, and entrepreneurship, or something like that, right? That's the brand that I want to communicate. And I have an opinion, and sometimes people don't like the opinion, and that's okay, right? You know, but you gotta sit there and think about what that opinion, what that voice is. So really, really important. Be along the lines of being the expert. Why is this also important from a business perspective? Well, you want to be an influencer. You want to be the individual that people come to and go, you know what? I want to, you know, I within the context of Data Knives, we want to figure out some predictive, you know, lead generation stuff, or we want to build lists, or we want to figure out what people are using, or you know, or on their website, or who are using our competitors. All those sorts of things. Give us some advice. That's the conversation you want people to have, and it's because you want to be an influencer in your world. In retargeting, you know, folks are trying to figure out how do we actually reach our better advertise and reach our audience across multiple channels, etc., and follow them around. I mean, you know, those are incredibly important topics around marketing that you guys should be absolutely leading the conversation around. Okay. The last thing I'll talk about is your personal blog. The fact is, let me take a step back. The fact is that, you know, we have, I don't know, 8 people on this thing, and maybe 2 are going to do something. I'm surprised. I'd be surprised if half of you are not sleeping right now, just because I was in your shoes at one point too, and I get it, right? I mean, I was the first to fall asleep in most meetings, because I hate meetings. But anyways, and so I would really encourage you to take a couple of these things and really do something, even if it's just optimizing your LinkedIn profile. But I can assure you, if you start having these conversations and you start moving forward, taking 2 or 3 steps in this direction, you're going to see results. And here's another thing: don't get, you know, bent out of shape if you don't see results in the short term. I started this organization called Sales for Startups about 4 years ago, and Sales Hacker bought the assets earlier this year. And when I started creating content and doing events on the content side, guess how many page views I had day one? 0. Well, maybe some of the page views I generated, right? 0. Now that site, as I don't know what the latest numbers are, it was several thousand page views a month. It's heavily indexed years later, and I hear that it's doing great under Sales Hacker. But the point is, I took the first step in the direction of building my brand around the topic that I was passionate about from a step 1. From 0, and that's what's incredibly important when you're trying to be an entrepreneur and you're trying to build your brand, because you guys are all the CEOs of yourself, right? And if you're going to be in the business world, that's the reality of the situation. How are you going to stand out, you know, amongst the crowd, right? Yeah, just because you're in Silicon Valley doesn't matter anymore, right? And so again, I mean, we could sit here and talk about a million things, and you're not going to be implementing a million of those things, but implement 2 or 3. I mean, trust me on this. Personal blog, launch a blog. I don't care if it's like a e-blogger thing or Tumblr or something, but start having sort of a schedule of posting content. Maybe it's once a quarter, you know. It doesn't matter, but you got to start somewhere, and that's really, really important. So the next step here is we're going to have about, I guess, I don't know, 15 minutes here or something to answer your questions in the document. But as I'm looking up the document here, Sean, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
No, it sounds great. I think you know, the idea of a personal blog is pretty intimidating at first. I'll tell you a true story. I bought a domain about a year and a half ago, and I have one blog on it, and it took me like 6 months to finally get it up there because it's a kind of a daunting task, and writing is not something that if you're a normal person comes easy to you, and if it doesn't come easy to you, or if it does come easy to you, finding the time to do it consistently is even harder. So one thing that I try to do is, on our Sales Off blog, is I try to contribute 1 to 2 pieces per week. And the way that I do that, which you may not have all the luxury of, is I get our marketing team to like steal my keys or something, so I can't leave until I've actually pushed it out. But the second thing is I have a reminder, and I'll get into the office 45 minutes early twice a week, and try to time block myself onto one topic, write 10 points on outline, and then write a couple paragraphs about it, and push it out. Ideally, it's something that can contribute to your belief in the space and what you do professionally, but it can also be something that's a little bit different. But I would encourage you to do anything you do, put it on your LinkedIn profile to start building that brand. Is this helpful so far?
Yes. Yeah.
Definitely.
Very much so.
Okay. Action is the only thing that matters in this world, by the way. Well, that's not completely true, but within the context of this and other things. But that's more of a philosophical conversation. So let's get into some of the questions here. How do you make time for these things? Good point. Well, I'm single and almost and I haven't been on a date in, I don't know. So I'll start
Great.
with that.
There's a less depressing option. And I think.
Go ahead, Sean.
I think you gotta prioritize it in kind of just the things that you want to get done for your own personal growth. So I think the first step into doing anything you don't really want to do, or maybe you do want to do but it's hard to do, is convincing yourself that it's easy to do. So this idea that there's something that you want to do on one end of the graph and something that's hard to do, you have to simplify it. So in order to simplify it, you've got to either come up with a way to convince yourself that there's only 3 easy steps I have to do to get this done, and I can repeat them day or weekly or monthly. So the first part of that is setting a goal. I think you need to set a goal and say, by the end of this month, I'm going to put up, I'm going to do 1 piece of content, or I'm going to update my LinkedIn profile. I'm going to join 1 group and contribute 5 comments and have 1 thread, right? And write it down somewhere, probably on your desk or in your bathroom mirror. I'm serious about that. It's the #1 way to get shit done is to visualize it, and you can't visualize it until you write it down and you put it somewhere that you're looking at every day. And so if you stare at it every single day and you're committed to holding yourself accountable, you'll find the time to do it. The other part is just either wake up earlier or stay later, but time box it. So you don't just wake up and say, man, I'm going to do this today, and it takes you an hour, and you're 2 hours in, and you're like, I've wasted my whole day. You can't do it that way, and that's not how you can get things done scalably and repeatably. You have to say, I'm going to spend 30 minutes on this today, and that's it, right? And you wake up, you go and do it. If you don't get it done, that's fine. Do it the next time, but you don't want to get into that trap of trying to do something that takes way too much time, and then there's that diminished return on the fact that it took you 2 hours to write something that you didn't even post, and then you're just like, well, why did you even try to do it again? And this doesn't just apply to content. It can apply to anything. So making time is something you have to commit to yourself, visualize it, and then time box it.
I 100% just agree with Sean. One thing I remember, I was a door-to-door salesperson a long time ago when I was in grad school, and one of the most important concepts was schedule. Now, door-to-door selling and what we do is clearly different, but this is something that applies to multiple aspects of our lives. Schedule is your lifeline. If you are able to look at your day in a very organized way, which is your schedule, time slots, that kind of stuff, you'd be amazed at how many things you can actually get done. So how do I find time? I literally have blocks at like 11 o'clock at night where I'll be like, I got 25 minutes before I pass out to write a blog post or complete something. I know it sounds crazy, but here's the fact of the matter. You want to be successful in life, you got to do the things that others are not willing to do. I don't want to say unsuccessful people, because that's not an accurate sort of or fair statement, but That's the bottom line. What are you willing to do that others are not willing to do? Period. And that's the only thing I can really say. Now, will it take sacrifice? Absolutely. Will it be tough? Yes. Will you be tired in the morning if you schedule that thing at midnight? 100%. But I can tell you over the course of my career, the last 12 years or so, I've not slept well multiple nights. I've crushed myself and have burned out 1,000 times and always get back on the horse because that's just how it is. So there's no like easy formula here. So there's no magic trick that's going to be like, yeah, well, it's going to be easy if I follow this. You're going to have to dig deep and want to do this stuff. Period. Yeah. Right? And it starts with schedule. Period. And that's as a salesperson as well, by the way. The most amazing sales people I've ever worked for or worked with are incredibly, incredibly organized. Something I struggle with all the time because I'm a very kind of like creative dude and have my own kind of way of doing things. But they're incredibly important. They know what they're doing at like every day during their week at 12:15. They're like, yeah, I'm prospecting at that time, or that's my slot for meetings, or those are my callbacks. Those sorts of things. And so again, that's just to hammer the notion of being able to really create a schedule that works. And here's the thing, how you don't burn out is you don't put unrealistic things on your calendar. If you don't sit there and expect yourself to write 3 blog posts a week, it's not going to happen, or you're going to lose sleep and you're going to look like this in 10 years, right?
Cool. So if you
Come on, I got some laughs there. Come on, guys.
If you don't believe the strategy, just think back to when you were in college and all the times you didn't write a paper, but I guarantee you, and I'd bet my job on it, that you guys found a way, and the night before, after going out and having a couple beers, to write that paper that you put off for 6 weeks, right? And it's just a motivation factor that it's due the next day. So time boxing it and setting a limit on yourself is the fastest way to do that. Cool. I think second question's a good one. What have been some of the most influential articles, books, webinars, etc. that you recommend? There's a guy, there's 2 people I'm going to tell you about that blog. One blogs every single day at the same time, and the other person puts out content I feel like it's every single day, and it may be. So the first guy, his name is David Cummings. He's one who founded, CEO of Pardot, who is from Atlanta and owns the building that we have our business in, his big startup community, largest startup community on the East Coast. David Cummings has a blog, and he posts at 10 p.m. every single day, every single night, 10 p.m. Blog about startups, entrepreneurship, scaling a SaaS business. It's an incredible blog, and you should subscribe to it. If nothing else, follow him on Twitter, and with clockwork, I know when it's 10 p.m. because he tweets out his next post, and he does it religiously. The second one is a blog called The Sales Blog. The Sales Blog is by a guy named Anthony, and he writes about hustling. It's like his topic. But it like gives me chills every time I read it. And the guy puts out like 3 or 4 pieces of content a week and nails every single one on the head. And you need to follow him as well. It'll pump you up. If you read his blogs before you come into work about what it takes to hustle and what hustlers do and what hustlers don't do and all this stuff, like I'm jacked up, ready to go. And I'll give you one more bonus one. A guy named Jason Limkin runs a community called Saster. The guy is the #1 Quora contributor in the world. He's probably the #1 person on Twitter in the world, like as far as business goes. He literally tweets like a machine all the time. And his blog has a lot of good content, but I would rather use his as an example of someone who's just present all the time. All of his answers are on point. They're never selfish. They're never directed for his own motives. They're really and genuinely there to help people in his space do it. And he's one of those people that have done it before with EchoSign, and he built the largest SaaS community, so people listen to him. But his intentions are good, and he's always there to contribute. And if that doesn't build a brand, I don't know what in the hell this world will. So those are my 3.
Yeah, in terms of influential articles or books, I read this book that's probably 10 years ago or so, maybe more, called, it was by an author called, named Og Mandino. It was The Greatest Salesman in the World. And it was a little book. It's like 50 pages. That was that was a book that I felt was incredibly powerful for me, just walking me through the idea of a hustle and the process, and it was like this, more of a kind of a hybrid actually between like a sales book and a fiction book. Some other books that I think are interesting, the Challenger Sale is pretty good. The Spin Selling, I think everyone should read Spin Selling. Forgot who the author is, but it's a pretty well-known book. Today there's the Sales Acceleration by our buddy Mark Roberge over at HubSpot. I think that's a really cool book, not because it's inspirational or whatnot, but it's just so thoughtful, and it really takes an incredible, just a beautiful quantitative. So for me, the sales tactics stuff is great, but you got to figure out what is it that I need to do. What are the books and the content and the quotes that I need to read to get myself motivated and inspired every day? And those are the things that I really enjoy. So I don't know what that is for you, but Winston Churchill has some really great quotes. I would Google a bunch of quotes, motivational quotes, and put them up on your wall. I mean, I have tons of stuff all over the place. When I was a door-to-door salesperson, you can imagine the agony that I went through every day for 3 years, knocking on people's doors and trying to sell them books and CD-ROMs, and I had to sit there and really motivate myself. So those quotes were really great. I can follow up with some quotes that I really enjoy, but find the ones that just get you going. Watch videos on YouTube, those sorts of things.
Cool. I think we got time for a couple more. I know you guys got to get back to work. One of the ones that I like on here is how does defining your personal brand change the way you work? Specifically because it has changed the way that I work, so much so that I really can't remember working any different. And really what it comes down to is we talked a little bit about how you're marketing as inbound content, and that inbound content is driven specifically to bring leads to you, right? When you go out and you develop your own personal brand, you're becoming a content machine, an inbound content machine for your own self and for your business. And you'd be so surprised the amount of people that will hit you up on LinkedIn or on Twitter or email you personally asking you to take that next step, and it is what you do. They'll say, hey man, I saw your content, or I saw that you posted on here. I'm interested in what you do. I'd love to see a demo, right? And so you're creating this inbound content machine for yourself and for your person, which is then representative of your brand, and it's like you're not selling anything for you, you're selling for your company, but in order to make it easier, you get your name out there. Introductions become easier. The more people you know or you've interacted with, I'm sure you've done this a million times. You find some prospect that you want to talk to, you realize that so-and-so VP of marketing at another space is someone that you've dealt with and have a great relationship with. You might ask them for a recommendation, or you might say to him, hey, I'm great buddies with him, and I see you guys have worked together, stuff like that. Your network starts to grow. And I'm not just talking about your LinkedIn network. I'm talking about the actual network of humans that you know and you can interact with, which then can turn into more conversations, more opportunities for you. And I said it earlier as a joke, you never have to interview again, but that is the end goal of building your personal brand. And I say that in like the most sincere way possible. My personal goal is to have my name out there enough that if I ever need a new job in the same space, I know all the people and who know that I'm available or know what I'm able to do. And so you got to keep it classy, right? But it's just about networking, to have those people you can call on for favors, or you can put down on paper and say, yes, I physically know this person. So it's changed the way I've worked dramatically.
Yeah, I'll just add a quick second on that. Yeah, I mean, it changes the game. When you're a brand that people, or influencer that people recognize and know that you have an opinion that you stand by, and it's a relevant opinion that's data backed or backed with content and experience, that there's just no, there's no way to get around it. It's incredibly powerful. Imagine if Andreessen, what's his name, Mark Andreessen, walked in the room and gave you some advice. You'd be like, yeah, I'm going to consider his advice, right? So that kind of speaks for itself. I like this question. What are some of the biggest lessons you learn from a failing experience. Boy, let me tell you, the number one way to learn is through failure. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've failed over the years and continue to fail, and it's okay. You know, you got to just think about it as not a failure but a learning experience. Now, you might be sick to your stomach, you know, when something happens, and it does take time to get over. But understand that I had a mentor of mine tell me one time when I had this company falling apart several years ago, and I was like, oh my God, what do I do now? It's another failure. And he was like, dude, it's always darkest before dawn, and you'll always have another opportunity. If you treat people appropriately, you're as honest as possible, you know, you treat people with kindness, and you apologize when you're wrong, you're most likely always going to get another chance. And so failing is incredibly important. What I realized were those things about failing. What I also realized was that no matter how much it hurt, no matter how much it threw me off, that I was always going to overcome it. You know, it's kind of like a cold call that you know, where the person's yelling at you and all this stuff. You feel terrible. You feel like throwing the phone across the room and quitting. You know, because you're like, man, I don't need this. But you know, you realize there's emotions also involved there, and that you will overcome it. And your ability to overcome, this is a powerful concept. Your ability to overcome what we conceive as failure and keep moving forward, get punched in the gut and keep moving forward is what it's just.
Cut off, real hard. Left us hanging. The only thing I'll say to that, what I learned from my biggest lesson was own it. There's going to be a ton of times you screw up. Everyone screws up. The worst thing you can do is blame or push blame to either personal, like other people, or other physical factors that happen. Owning it is the fastest way to get some respect, especially if you've kind of built up a reputation. And that applies really to every facet of business and life. I think George may be gone, which is fine because we're about to wrap it up. But any last questions from you guys? Was this helpful for you guys?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Cool. And I'm sure this goes for George, but if you've got any questions about anything in the future, George is back. Feel free to shoot me or George an email. I'd love to help out any way possible.
Awesome.
Cool.
Thank you, guys.
George, you got anything to add? All right, I'll sign off for George.
All right, thanks, guys.
All right, thanks, George. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. You have a good one. All right, dude.